We're so excited to welcome on to Theater and College Hoops a former forward for LSU and Morehead State, a man who was on Ben Howland's staff at Mississippi State before taking on an assistant and associate head coach roles at McNeese State, which preceded where he's at today. We got assistant coach at Creighton University, Jalen Courtney-Williams. Jalen, what's going on, man? Thank you for making the time.
What an intro. How about that?
I did my research, Jalen.
Yeah, no, that's incredible.
I mean, you have a very incredible past, and we're going to get to know all about it. I want you to go into depth and detail about, your playing days, and then also how you got into coaching. But let me first start off with Creighton. We were talking a little bit about it before recording. You guys are rolling right here in January.
Yeah, we're having some fun. We're having some fun. It's like I told you off, I guess, when we weren't recording. We're getting better. The team's getting better, and that's what you want to see. You want to see guys grow together, get better as the season goes on, and you want to play your best basketball, close to March or as close to March as you can.
You're putting the ball in the hoop too. I'm looking at the last 3 games, 85 the last 2 games.
Yeah.
Triple overtime. You put in 97 against Seton Hall, but still.
55 minutes helps.
You guys are putting the ball in the hoop, and I think that's what a lot of folks expect from Creighton basketball. I suppose their brand or coming in is just the high-level offense. Last couple of games, what are you attributing this offensive uptick to?
No, you know what? We our point guard is a transfer, so it's his first time in our system, which it takes some getting used to. The pace that we want to play at, the way the ball moves, it's really unique, I'd like to think. And then other guys are just in new roles. Trey Alexander is in a new role. Baylor Shireman's in a fairly new role, even though they played heavy minutes a year ago. Both of those guys are asked to do more of the ball handling and playmaking than they were a year ago. And then Mason Miller is in a brand new role. And so, again, as the season goes, you want to see guys progress. And I think that's what you're seeing.
So you talked about a number of transfers and, people playing new roles. How much different is it, today with all these moving parts, like every single year? Like, should a fan of Creighton or any other school not even expect to see what a team really looks like until late January, early February?
It shouldn't be a shocker if a fan of anybody has to get to know a new team from a year-to-year standpoint. I think we're unique in the way we like to do it. We want to maintain our culture and some of the things that we do. And we do that with recruiting young guys out of high school. And you go in the portal with a need in mind. But the rules are want to dictate otherwise. So it's tough for a fan base like ours. We like to grow guys and see guys grow, and our fans like to do the same thing. Our supporters rather like to see guys grow from freshman to sophomore, Ryan Kalkbrenners of the world. So we want to continue to do that the best you can, but you also have to adapt into a new climate. So I think we're kind of balancing that the best we can.
I'm so glad you mentioned all of the different personnel and the lineups, and Kalkbrenner especially. There are some names that we're going to really dive into, and you've been integral in their success and their growth as well. But I want to start first with you, Jalen, and give our audience a better understanding of who you are, where you come from, and your college basketball journey. So You're from Jackson, Mississippi, right? Mm-hmm. We don't get many high-level players like yourself, my man. So can you take us behind the curtains of the recruiting process, your decision to go to LSU? Take us through that. What was that like as a high schooler?
Man, well, first of all, I would like to say I was probably the worst good basketball player in that space at the time.
How do you define that? How do you define that?
I'll explain that. Mississippi basketball comes in like stages and waves, right? So every 10 years you get a huge influx of talent for whatever reason. I can't really explain it. Before me, it was Al Jefferson and Monte Ellis and all those guys. And then it took a few years. And then all of a sudden you get LaQuentin Ross, who was the number 1 player in the country in my era. You get Rodney Hood, who, went to the NBA. Johnny O'Bryant played in the NBA, played with me at LSU. You get, a string of top 50 to 70 players that we, a lot of us went high major Division I basketball, and a lot of us went mid-major. You get Isaiah Cannon, again, went to Murray State, had a great career, went to the NBA. So I was probably the worst of that bunch. But we had a good time, man. And from there, went to LSU. was recruited by Trent Johnson and his staff. He was maybe 2 years removed from Stanford. He gets the LSU job, and LSU is where I wanted to go my whole life. I have a lot of family in Louisiana. LSU went to the Final Four in 06, and that was like the biggest brand of basketball, close to me at the time. So I was fortunate enough to get recruited and to play there, and I played there with some of my best friends, Johnny O'Brien, as I mentioned, Andre Stringer, who was an AAU teammate of ours, Johnny and myself. And we all played on the same team in college. So how often do you get to do that? Did that for 3 years. From there, went to Morehead State for my last year of basketball under Sean Woods, and current head coach there, Preston Spradlin, was an assistant. And unfortunately, I was injured the entire time I was there. I had 6 total knee surgeries in college. So I spent a lot of time in the training room and not enough time on the basketball court, unfortunately. And just in that process, man, I fell into coaching. Kind of, it was a surprise to me. I had no plans on ever being a coach. But through those injuries, I just spent a lot of time, like I said, in the training room, but also in the coach's office, and just trying to give myself to my team the best way I could. And sometimes that was just through my voice, or through maybe I watched extra film or something like that. And I don't know, it just became the rest of my life.
So, well, first off, you didn't need to bring up LaQuint Ross to us Arizona guys, because that's still 10 years later, still a sore subject, at least in my home. But so is there any point?
Q was a bad boy, man. Q was a bad boy.
Okay, man, I know. Okay, I know. He was great.
I'm sorry. I got another one for you. Another name I didn't mention. Renardo Sidney was the number 1 player in the country as well.
He was nasty. Yeah.
Yeah. So I came out in the class of 2010. Renardo's class of 2009. LaQuinton was 2011. So in that span, man, we had a really high level of basketball being played in the state of Mississippi.
Renardo Sidney was a guy.
He was the real deal. He was the real deal. So, a guy like me, I was kind of like in the mix, but I wasn't him or LaQuinton, but I was in the mix. And no, it made for some really, really fun times in the state of Mississippi at the time. And nationally, we made a little noise nationally as well. And, again, you look back on those times and you think, like, wow, it's hard to even explain. You tell people all the time, like, man, we really had it going in Mississippi. But, again, I told you it comes in stages. As you fast forward, you get Malik Newman, who was the number 1 player in the world at a time as well. And so I was at Mississippi State with Malik and Quindary Witherspoon, who got drafted as well. They were in the same class. And, the rest is history, man.
Dude, all these names just essentially define our lifetime as, all 3 of our adult lifespans of college basketball here.
Exactly.
So when you were, you talk about being injured and how, I don't want to say that you fell into coaching, right? But, kind of it wasn't something that you had planned on. So was there a point in that time that you were like specific point that you can remember while you were injured that you were like, wait a second, maybe this is what my next, path is going to be? Was it like during a game or, calling out a play or something like that? Did you have like an aha moment or anything like that?
No, it was not like that at all. Like most guys, I was holding on to the hoop dream as long as I could. So I thought I would get healthy and get back on the court at some point during the season, which I got back on the court, but I still wasn't healthy. I threw up a couple air balls and I was like, I don't think I could do this. No, I attest that to just really good leaders. I think the best leaders create other leaders, and I've been fortunate enough to be around some really strong leaders and coaches, and they had a huge influence on me. And at a time where I didn't really know where to turn and pivot in my life, all of them, whether it be Trent Johnson and his staff, whether it be Johnny Jones and his staff, who I played for at LSU for 1 year. And then the Morehead staff as well, like all of them, kind of counsel me in this direction. And I'm so glad they did.
So you talk about some of the leaders that you've been able to work with. I'm curious to know about your time spent in Starkville and working with Ben Howland. I mean, this is a guy who, in my eyes, could be considered one of the more underrated coaches in like the 21st century. The guy's been to multiple Final Fours.
Yeah.
Key component, architect of those great UCLA teams, right, with Kevin Love and Russell Westbrook.
Yeah.
And so you got to work with him in Starkville. What was that like? What is Ben Howland like? Take us behind the curtains there, because that's kind of really like where you first cut your teeth into coaching, right?
Absolutely. And so first of all, being a player and then a coach is completely different walks of life almost. And so talk about an eye-opening experience. My first month in the office with Ben Howland, right? He's extremely detail-oriented. You know what I mean? And so as a young dude like myself coming fresh off the basketball court, a lot of times I didn't know what he was talking about or asking for. And it started out, more on the court with guys. And then I eventually became his video coordinator, which is a completely different experience within itself. But he kept me on my toes. Again, as a young coach, I was up late a lot of nights trying to think like him and try to predict what he would ask for the next day and things like that. And I think that shows itself right now in my attention to detail and things like that. But phenomenal basketball coach and even better person.
So real quick, Taylor, before you jump back in, growing up in Mississippi, I'm not from Mississippi, but I have to think that you're either an Ole Miss fan or a Mississippi State fan. What were you growing up, and did that conflict arise at all in coaching at Mississippi State?
Listen, man, I was a Tiger. I told you I was a Tiger through and through. My dad is from Louisiana, and a lot of his family is still in Louisiana. And it was just something about the purple and gold when I was growing up, man. I wasn't into the maroon at the time, and the Ole Miss, same thing. And that wasn't really for me. And I remember going on my official visit to LSU, and I was like, yep, these are my people. This is where I belong.
Just one Saturday night in Death Valley probably is all it
That's
would
all
take
it took.
for me to be like, yeah, okay, this will work.
That's all it took.
I still watch that video to get hyped for, and I have no association with LSU.
Yeah.
So
well, I went to a party on my visit. I won't tell you what happened, but I was like, yep, I'm coming. This is this is where I'm going to school.
We get it. Don't worry, we get it. So
no, it wasn't that bad.
So, when you got into coaching, obviously you were the youngest you possibly could be, essentially getting into coaching. So what kind of advantage was that in terms of like being able to relate to the players on the court? And then also what was the disadvantage to that? You kind of talked about having to learn so much so quickly, but was it more of an advantage to be that young as a coach or a disadvantage?
I would say advantages for sure. Like you get in and I was still able to get on the court with guys, really compete against guys. The best I could. I was still coming off a few knee injuries. But they knew I could relate to them as a player and, just a student athlete, things like that. I guess the disadvantage came in because I was around people that had been in the business of coaching for so long, whether it be Coach Howland, the assistants, the support staff, everybody had been on that side of it for so long. And I was coming in, green, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, so to speak. And, every now and then I still feel that I'm around, Greg McDermott now, who's, he probably would hate me if I said this, but he's been a head coach longer than I've been alive, I think. And so there's always moments where I feel like I got the answers, and then he comes out of left field with something that I never would have thought of. But it's because he's seen it, done it, heard it, and been a part of it. But again, I'm a student of the game, and I'm a sponge, so I've been able to take it all in, and it's helped.
You want to talk about a painfully underrated coach? Greg McDermott is also on that list.
He's the best. He's the best coach in the game. I don't care. I don't care who thinks what. He's the best coach in the game.
Talk it, Jalen.
And I think that goes. You look at his coaching tree right now. You look at the success some of these guys are having. I saw Allen Huss was National Coach of the Week today as a first-year head coach. And I think that's a testament to not only those guys and the work they put in, but it's a testament to Coach McDermott.
So before we dive into this year's edition of Creighton basketball, this year's team and this year's identity, forgive me, I'm going to open up some wounds from last year, but it's only because it's only because we're so fortunate to have you on. But the SDSU game, of course, what I'm curious to know, Jalen, is what was going through the team and your mind that last possession, basically those last free throws, and then what was it like in the locker room? Whatever you're able to share, and how has that driven you, if at all, this season?
Yeah, it's like a blank when that whistle blew. I think everybody was just in shock. Couldn't believe that like this is how it could end, and ultimately did end. Whether it was a foul or not, refs got to do their job. Man, what a tough way to go, right?
Yep.
Obviously, everybody in the locker room, there were some tears, and it was just shock. And I don't know if you guys saw Coach McDermott's post game afterwards. It kind of went viral. Our staff did a good job. They put pianos behind it and all that stuff, man. It was a real tearjerker, but it was very genuine messaging from Coach McDermott about the season that we had, how those guys came together. Most of them young. We had a number of sophomores on that team, and transferred with Baylor Shireman. That team came together, fought some adversity with 6 losses in a row. Could have splintered, could have went different directions, and at the end of the day, they came together and had a pretty fun run. So, moving forward to this year, I think it drove guys like Trey, guys like Baylor, Kalkbrenner. It drove those guys to want to come back and see if we can do it again, and do it even better. And then guys like Stephen Ashworth, on the outside looking in, I think it gave him a little bit of a chip on his shoulder as well. He's like, I want to play there and maybe do what they couldn't do a year ago. So it's been fun.
So not to belabor this bad news here for too long, but so when the tournament goes on, and obviously there's only one team that wins the tournament every year, right? When you're in that situation, and it is quite the heartbreaking situation, as you're watching at this point, the few remaining games of the tournament, are you pro San Diego State? Are you anti San Diego? Are you not watching any of it? Like what is the team going through? Or is it just everyone's different, right?
You know what? We were at least I can speak for myself. I was pro Big East. So you get guys that you've been to battle with in terms of UConn. You want to see them have success. And they ultimately did. And so I like to think that our odds would have risen had we made it that far. You get 2 Big East teams battling it out for the national championship. That would have been fun, but they ended up getting it done. So good for them.
So in unpacking this a little bit more, and because of your elite playing days, and now you're a young star in the coaching space.
I like how you say that. They weren't that elite, but all right, let's do it.
Hey man, I'm impressed. Look, I only played 2 years of varsity ball. All right. And I'm over here hosting a podcast now. So I got a lot of respect for what you do.
Let's talk about it.
But in terms of being a player versus being a coach, you've been in the Big East now. I know you've had some nail biters and obviously a lot of tournament success. Player versus coach, what holds more butterflies for you, being on the court playing or on the sideline?
Coaching for sure, because you come up with the game plan on this side of it, but you're kind of relying on everybody to do their jobs, and there's not much you can do other than yell at the top of your lungs. As a player, you at least you have some type of physical impact on the outcome, unless you're playing against, I don't know, Anthony Davis, and you don't have that much impact at all. That's part of my story.
Yeah, that's one of the best college players ever.
Yeah, exactly. But you have a good one. I'm sorry. But yeah, I mean, coaching for sure. But it's fun, man. It's fun, and I wouldn't change anything about it.
So from reading your profiles and stuff, you have a couple kids, right?
3.
Did I read that?
3.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I just had my first kid, right? And if your parents were anything like everybody else's parents, they were always like, well, just wait until you are a parent, right?
Yeah. So what do you think about it?
Well, I think it's great. 5 months old. We're doing wonderful. She's wonderful,
Oh,
right?
Yeah. Congrats.
It's been great. Thank you. But so when you became a coach, were you like, oh, maybe I treated my coaches a certain way as a player for years, and now I'm on the other side, and I'm like, oh shoot, maybe I should have.
I text every one of them like, hey, I'm sorry. You were right. I was wrong. I'm an idiot. And a lot of them I'm really close to now, and we'll see each other on the road, and I'll just like go give them big hugs, because in hindsight's 2020, obviously. But all the things that they were trying to instill in us and in me, turns out they weren't wrong.
Perspective is pretty funny.
Yeah, it turns out all the film they watched, maybe they knew what they were talking about.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about this year's team and some of the results. Man, a couple of weeks ago, you played an absolute thriller. When I first reached out to Jalen Taylor, I basically was like, yo, I'd love to have you come on. By the way, that game was insane. As a fan, I loved it. Of course, I'm talking about the triple overtime game at Seton Hall, who has been a very good team and a very strong team this year. Jalen, I'm curious to know, did you take anything about your team away from that triple overtime win? Like, was there something you learned about this program that maybe you didn't know coming into that game?
Program, no, but this specific team,
Sure.
you saw that team's connection really, really shine. There were times where we thought we won the game and we didn't. There was times when we, all right, this game's probably over, and you lose it and you didn't, right? But that team showed real resiliency and connection, and the ability to have a short-term memory, whether good or bad, and just move on to the next play. I mean, it showed a lot of maturity and connection. That's what I would say stuck out.
So when you look at, that back-to-back, or you played a close one at St. John's, a one-point game against St. John's, you lose to the number one team in the country, and then you go back and win this triple overtime game against a really up-and-coming Seton Hall team.
Yeah.
In a month from now, or on Selection Sunday in 48 days, is that like stretch of basketball right there something that we're going to look back on and be like, oh, that was the point that Creighton came together for the season? Do you see it as, can you identify games like that in that capacity? Be like, okay, that was like the turning, not that you guys needed a turning point, but like the turning point in the season where it all came together and we hit our stride right there.
I guess from your perspective, that's easy to do. Look at games. I'd like to say we could look at practices on our end. Right. There's just been, I never thought we had a bad practice with this group, but there have been practices here lately where you could tell like the chemistry's really where it needs to be. Guys are completely locked in. You move past that triple overtime game and there's a quick turnaround for the next game, and you can't do as much the next day physically, so it's a mental day. But the way those guys took in the information in the scout report and brought it to the game floor, I would like to point to things like that.
College basketball seasons, for guys like us who are just sitting on the couch not putting in the work like you guys, it can feel long but also compressed, right? And so I'm always curious to know, Jalen, you've been on sidelines now for a good bit to understand where and what you want to see from your program and your team during different parts of the season, right? Like, so in pre-Thanksgiving, I'm not expecting a team to play it at all world level. Yeah. Same thing with December. We're here in late January and February's coming around the corner. You don't necessarily, I can't imagine you want to see your team hit their ceiling right now, but right. What exactly in this juncture of the season are you looking for, and what you're looking to accomplish? And it can be on the practice court, it can be in games itself. Give us a better understanding of what you and your staff want to see from this team at this juncture of the season.
Well, I'll start at the beginning, right? Like you said, you're not going to play your best basketball in November, but you want to see guys really going out and attempting to do what you preach every day and what you work on in practice. At this point, you hope to see real execution on both sides of the ball. You hope to see guys carry over scout reports into the games and start to really speak your language and really carry over what you do on a day-to-day basis. You can't control whether the ball goes in or not, but hopefully they're playing with big-time confidence. Hopefully everybody kind of understands what they bring to a team and they go out and try to execute their job. So right now, that's what you want to see more than anything.
So is there anyone on this team, if we go back to the beginning of the year like we just did, is there anyone on this team specifically that's made a longer stride than anyone else? Anyone else that you've been like impressed with, that this guy's really taken this in more so?
Yeah, it's easy call. It's Stephen Ashworth. He comes in from a really good Utah State team. They had a lot of success. He had a ton of success, and he comes in on this team. It's different. You're playing with, potential NBA guys on this team. Your shot selection, changes. The volume of shots change a little bit. Obviously, the competition level changes. And I'll tell you, and he knows this, at one point he was the worst defender, maybe on the court. And he's somehow transformed himself into one of the better defenders. Like, he's hard to take off the floor, and you can put him on other teams' best guard and feel good about it. Even you look back a game ago, Jalen Terry, I think he maybe hit 6 threes the game before ours. He couldn't even get one off in this last game. And that's a credit to Stephen Ashworth and, you know, how he's made the decision to be a big-time defender, and he's taken coaching and followed the scout report to a T, and his maturity to understand what he was maybe weak at, you know, at the beginning and make it a strength.
Stephen Ashworth's emergence has been noticeable for sure.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about Ryan Kalkbrenner, excuse me.
Yeah.
He is, so we have what we call Van Wilder guys, Jalen, and it's a term of endearment. What that means is that this is a guy that's seemingly been around forever. But Ryan Kalkbrenner, man, I see him taking nicks, cuts, bruises, gets battered, and I personally think he's a victim of his own size in the sense that he probably doesn't get as many calls as he should just because he's huge. And I remember that game against Seton Hall. I think he took one to the chops, and I just admire his toughness and how he's evolved as a player, not just a terrific defender, but now he's a real post presence. Can you talk? And I think you've been integral in that as well, Jalen. Can you talk a little bit about when you first got to Omaha, working with Ryan Kalkbrenner to where he is now, one of the best Big East players of the, like 5-7 years or so, I would say.
Yeah, listen, you hit it on the head. First of all, like I tell people all the time when they ask me about his toughness, you're talking about a dude that's might have maybe missed 4 practices total in the time that I've been at Creighton. So yeah, he gets beat up and banged up, not only in games but in practice. And our style of play it asks a lot out of him on both sides of the ball. Man, he just keeps showing up. So I think that's real toughness and mental toughness to keep showing up every day. I can't take any credit for his development. I think his maturity and him making a decision of what kind of player he wanted to be, that's the biggest testament, you know, to him. I think he's one of the guys that I can say in my career, in terms of taking in information and applying it immediately, he's been one of the best that I've ever been around. You know, you can coach him on Monday, and whatever you tell him on Monday, when you see him Tuesday, it's a part of who he is. So guys like that get better quickly. He's one of the smartest basketball players I've been around. You know, his IQ is insane on either side, you know, and you're talking about that in a center. That's pretty unique, but he can quarterback defensive coverages. You know, he can spit them out and help other guys get to the right spots. And, you know, we send everything to him. He's got a tough job, and he keeps showing up. So now you guys go their whole career and never coach a Ryan Kalkbrenner. So I'm grateful that I've been in a position to coach him and help him, you know, however, you know, I've been able to help him. But he's done a lot for us, and he continues to do so.
So bouncing off that, you know, after last year you lose Nemhard and Kaluma, you know, to high-level contributors. And so what is it like to have adults on the team, like a Shireman, like a Kalkbrenner? How much easier does that make your job as you bring these new guys in? And these aren't 18-year-old guys that you're asking to lead other guys.
Yeah.
These are 22, 23-year-olds that have played for, talking about Van Wilder guys, Shireman's been around even longer in college basketball than Kalkbrenner.
No doubt.
How much, I don't want to say easier, but how much easier does it make your job when you have these adults in the room, you know, as the season goes on?
Well, it's different because the communication is different. You know, it's one thing when you're talking about a freshman or a sophomore and you're trying to communicate roles and responsibilities to them. But guys like Baylor and Kalkbrenner, Trey, you know, even a new guy like Steven, he's been around the block a few times. You know, you watch the film, you tell him what you need from him, and those guys internalize the messages and try to go out and get it done. And the way they communicate with each other is unique. You know, we were the Baby Jays 2 years ago. That's what our fans used to call us, like the Baby Jays, you know, and now all of a sudden you have all this experience. It's different, man. Practice has been different. You hear their voices more than ever in our gym, at least more than you did in the last 2 years. So it's been really cool. It's been really cool. It's been unique for us, and maybe that happens more in the portal. Maybe you're older sooner and longer. You know, maybe not. Like I said earlier, we want to do it more the traditional route than we do the portal. We want to kind of balance it the best you can. But this year's been really unique and fun.
So the last two off seasons, we mentioned their names, right? You bring in Baylor Shireman before last year's season, and then this year you got Stephen Ashworth. And I want to unpack a little bit about your thought regarding communication, right? So when you bring in these new guys that have excelled in other programs, but Creighton, like this team has been built on the backs of guys like Trey Alexander and also Ryan Kalkbrenner. In terms of that communication, when you're bringing in these new guys who can certainly be contributors, is there a sit down or a messaging of, hey, this is what we're about. We need you to do your best to contribute to that. Like, what is that part of the recruiting as well, making sure that they can fit into the greater scheme?
Yeah, well, again, the Creighton, the way we play, I think, is unique, and you can't play like that without the right guys. And we try to identify guys that can play in our system. Coach says it all the time. It's nearly impossible to recruit a selfish person, and turn them into an unselfish player. So as we're out recruiting guys, we try to identify guys whose internal makeup kind of fits who we are and what we're about. And ultimately, our guys want to win. You know, Trey Alexander, Baylor, Ryan Kalkbrenner, those guys went to an Elite Eight, and you know, they came back hungry for more. So they wanted guys that could, you know, increase their probability to win. So it wasn't too many conversations of, hey guys, you know, we're going to bring in somebody to take a shot. No. These guys want to win. They want to compete, and they want to be around good players. And they're completely okay with sharing the spotlight and sharing the basketball and all those things. And I think that's what makes us, you know, us.
So, you know, we're all the same age here. We've seen a lot of changes really in the time that we've been, well, you have been a little more focused on basketball in your life than maybe Subi and I have, right? But in our lifespan of college basketball fans, right, we've seen the game change a ton since 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
In terms of how, you know, which plays are run, who you're recruiting, why you're recruiting them, all that type of stuff. So in terms of from when you were a recruit and you had, you know, you were in the prime of the one and done era, essentially, that like 08 to 2015 range, right? And I don't really think you can win in college basketball anymore with a bunch of one and dones. So, you know, you talk about how Creighton wants to develop some younger guys and, you know, go the more traditional route. So, I mean, how do you feel about one and dones and recruiting those type of guys versus guys that you need to develop now and turn into like the next Ryan Kalkbrenner that's going to be at the school for 3-4 years?
I just think everybody's timeline is different. You know, some guys are ready sooner than later. Some guys need some development. I just think the families and the kids got to do what's best for them, and I think each university has to do what's best for them, respectively. We've had a lot of success with guys, again, going a more traditional route, not necessarily one and dones. You know, I think all of the NBA guys that have come from Creighton were unranked players. You know, I think we're just now stepping into the realm of, you know, top 50 players here in the last 3 years or so. You know, I think this crop of guys has potential NBA players on it as well. But, you know, we've had success with, you know, guys that weren't necessarily highly touted. And, you know, we want to just continue finding the right guys for us, whether you're one and done or whether you're a no-star. That stuff doesn't matter in the grand scheme. So.
You talk about the right guys for you. There's a specific 5 that I want to talk about real quick because I was doing a bit of research here, Jalen. And this is one of the most efficient lineups in the entire country. Trey Alexander, Stephen Ashworth, Ryan Kalkbrenner, Mason Miller, Baylor Shireman.
Yeah.
That is such an efficient, by the numbers, a super efficient 5. Why?
Well, you mentioned a handful of guys that can all stretch the floor and really shoot it. And they really pass it as well. Guys are very unselfish. Again, that's our system. But you talk about the game changing since 06, 07, the three-point line has really become probably the biggest change. And when I was playing, you had traditional lineups with 2 post players, essentially, and maybe 1 shooter, and you play inside the arc like the 90s Pistons or something like that. Well, I think Coach McDermott was one of the first to embrace the change of the game, and you saw that with his son Doug, and you know their ability to shoot it on that team, and they shot it early, they shot it often, they shot long ones, And that's been a consistent theme of ours over the last 14 years that Mac's been at Creighton. So that lineup is just the 2024 version of his team in 2010. 4 or 5 guys now with Ryan, adding the 3-ball to his game that can really stretch the floor. They pass it. They're all unselfish. So I would say that's why.
Yeah.
So, this isn't necessarily specific to this year's team, but how much does having NBA alum, especially when coach's son is one of the best college basketball players of all time and an NBA player, how much interaction do you get with those guys, the NBA players that have come through Creighton, and how much does that impact like the current roster you have? Do they identify with a certain player? Do they spend a lot of time back on campus? Talk about those relationships.
No, it's huge. It's huge. Not just the NBA guys, even the guys that are playing overseas, right? I mean, they put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this thing, and you talk about this team being built on the backs of some guys, all those guys. So whenever they come back, and like these guys will practice with us, like Doug has been in practices, like real practices, like doing our coverages and doing the things that we want our guys to do. So it's always huge when those guys come back. Especially it helps when the best dude in college basketball at one point was coach's son. And talk about a special dude, man. He's incredible. He's a lot like his dad. Just his temperament's great. I joke with him all the time, man. He went to college and played daddy ball, like I could score 3,000 points if I played for my dad. No, I could not have. I could not have.
Dude, we do this. So we sometimes do trivia on here, right? And we always talk about like how many 2,000 point scorers a school had. And then you realize when Doug had 3,000 plus points and just the absurdity of his stats at Creighton. And like you said, a no-star guy too. That he is. What I love about Creighton basketball is the McDermotts in a lot of ways, because Doug is like the Creighton basketball player. In the development, just like not only just because he was his, the coach's son. Like, I mean, what a cool guy to be like the flag bearer of the school, right? And a great guy and he's our age too, which makes me feel worthless.
I'm telling you, there could not be a better guy. Like you said, that's a good way to put it, the flag bearer for Creighton basketball, because he's an incredible dude with an incredible story. And I'm sure he's tired of me asking about the story, because it's still so unbelievable sometimes that this no-star guy who played on the same high school basketball team as Harrison Barnes, everybody recruited Harrison and nobody recruited Doug, and then that guy plays 10 years plus in the NBA. It's remarkable. It's remarkable. But again, you're right. He is the greatest flag bearer of a school that you can have. I mean, talk about efficiency, right? He scored 3,000 points and probably 3,000 of the most efficient buckets that you've ever seen. And that's who we've been and who we want to remain.
Dougie did it with those big old sleeves too. That was another different era in college basketball. The
big tees, big shorts, wristbands.
That's right. I mean, I don't know how he did it, considering it. I feel like it would constrict my shooting motion, but that's how good of a scorer. And that's another thing, Taylor. Imagine having to, like, you're 18, 19 years old, you got class and things like that, study hall, whatever. You're coming around a screen trying to guard Doug McDermott in practice, or like Kyle Korver in practice, man. That's got to be really cool. But at the same time, like, good Lord, give me a break.
I'll tell you what I respect about a dude like Doug. And I'm sure he's been like this his whole career. I think guys would walk in, and it happens to us now. Guys watch us warm up, and guys would walk in and say, "Where's the 30-point a game guy? Where's he at? Him? Not him. No way." And then he would bust them up. I respect that. Make them believers, man. Make them believers.
Let me go back to the shorts and t-shirts just for a second here. My body type was not built for those shorts or t-shirts, and so there are some embarrassing pictures of me in some student sections from about 08 through about 11 there, when it was the very tight top Nike jerseys, and then the absolute parachute MC Hammer shorts. And there's a certain segment of my Facebook that I need to just purge, because it is not as 146 pounds my freshman year of college or whatever. Those shorts were not for me.
You and me both. There are pictures that pop up of me now. I have like 6X tall tee on. You know what I mean? Like you remember those days. I think it's coming back too. The young guys are wearing these real baggy clothes, man. It's coming back. I was dressing like that in 6th grade.
Yeah, I grew up in a place that was not trend setting. We're 5 years behind every trend from a small
Okay.
town, right? And so I'm just like, oh man, I had like 10 years of tall tees that I had to work through in my in my life, and I'm like the rest of the country only had 5. I had to deal with 10
Yeah,
years of that. Yeah, not good for me.
I'm with you. I'm with
We
you.
we were talking to J.R. Blount last week. He's over at Iowa State, and he's a former player. And I was like, they got these flicks from the runway sort of pictures, like the team account will post these kids walking into the arena. And I'm curious, Jalen, like when you showed up to games at LSU and when you were playing at Morehead State, what were you throwing on? Like, was it just the team issued
Yeah,
apparel?
it was team issue stuff, man. We couldn't afford any of the stuff these dudes are wearing these days, man. It's a
They look
different
good,
time
though.
now. It's a different time now.
Yeah, I'm not hating. They look
Our
good.
biggest thing we had. Do you remember nicekicks.com?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yes.
Kicks
Oh
on
yeah.
court was a big deal. Like that was
Yeah.
when you really made a splash, like whatever shoes you played in. And so we had to beg Coach Johnson, Trent Johnson at the time, to like, Coach, please let me wear these, man, please.
Well, that's when sorry, we're getting way off topic, but that's when there were so many like Kobe like 4s and 5s and,
Yeah.
6s, like they had new colorways every single week, it seemed like, and that was the era of college basketball when you didn't have to wear your blue and white shoes. You started going crazy with it. So yeah, I'm glad. Nicekicks.com, boy, or Kicks on the
Kicks
Court.
on court, man. Kicks
Yeah,
on
man,
court. Yeah.
I haven't. Man, that brings me back right there.
Man, I love this memory lane we're going down here. Jalen, I got a few quick hitters for you, though. Let's have a little fun here, okay?
Let's do it.
Greg McDermott. I've seen the man patrolling sidelines for as long as I can remember, right? Tell us a little bit about him off the court, though. What are some things that the public probably doesn't get to see about Greg McDermott? What are some things you want to share about him off court?
I'll just say he's funny, man. He's quick wit. And like he's this massive dude, and he's quiet, kind of, but then like when he gets going, he's a hilarious individual. He should talk to you. He doesn't believe I was a good player because he's seen me like 30 pounds overweight and all that stuff. Like somebody's got to let him know.
Yeah, man. I'm here to campaign for you. You let me know. I can do that for you, Jalen.
Subi has talked about your elite playing career at least 3 or 4 times. So I mean, this is the guy to talk to Doug. To coach about. Yeah,
I need him in my corner, man. I need him in my corner. But
you need a hype man, yeah.
Max, he's the best. Like I said, he's got the best temperament that I've ever been around. He's so poised and patient with his guys. I think one of the biggest compliments I think I've given him, and he was a little bit taken back by it when I gave it to him. I just told him, I said, you coach everybody in the program as if it's your son. Like everybody, with that type of patience, with that type of confidence. And I think that's why our guys play with so much freedom and confidence, and they really enjoy it.
The culture he's built there in Omaha is super impressive. Like, Taylor, do you know a time with Creighton basketball before Doug McDermott? I almost don't. Like, I think Doug McDermott, Creighton, Doug McDermott.
I mean, my mom lived in Omaha for 2 years growing up, so that would be about that would be my only reference point right there.
No, listen, this place has a lot of tradition and history, and they've had a lot of good basketball teams. Obviously, that this program going into the Big East changed things. It made it a national brand, and we're still working that direction. Like when I got here, I was making calls. I'm like, do you realize what's happened here? And a lot of people, didn't know. And I think those stones are starting to get unturned now, and people are starting to realize, what kind of place this is and how special Coach McDermott is.
You have called Mississippi home, and now Nebraska is home.
Yep.
Talk to me, compare and contrast those two states for me.
Biggest difference is the weather. Like, it was negative 20 or so last week or something like that, right? And the first time I experienced something like that, I almost FaceTime Mac and said, "Hey, man, I'm done. You didn't tell me about this." But year 3 now is normal. I think it's 35 out. It feels like South Beach. So that's the biggest difference. But, Southern hospitality, I thought was only in the South. But in the Midwest, man, these people they're great. Like my family, they've embraced me and my wife and my 3 girls in a way that it feels like we've been here forever and can't imagine, being anywhere else.
It looks. I mean, it looks like the hospitality is a real deal. Because are you in like a corner booth dedicated strictly to Jalen Courtney-Williams here?
No,
Wherever you're coming
it's
to us
not
from.
It's not that kind of deal, man. Not that kind of deal. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Go back to your playing days, even coaching. Actually, toughest place to play.
Toughest place to play when I was a player.
And if there's a specific game or moment, would love to hear that story too.
No, I'm just gonna say I played in Rep Arena one time, and I swear they went up 20 as soon as the ball got tipped up. It was ridiculous. that was the national championship team. It was like as soon as the ball went up, down 20.
You slipped up a little. You said something about AD. Was there like a particular play where you're like, golly, this guy's good?
No, he blocked my shot 3 times somehow. I don't know how he did it. I think he blocked a layup. He blocked a 3 ball, and he was nowhere near me. Both, it was 2 times. He was nowhere near me either time. So, it's always cool to look back and think like, wow, you shared a stage, so to speak. I was there with guys that'll go down as some of the greatest, players to play the game. So that's always cool. I will say this as a coach. Coaching in the Big East has been special. Obviously, I grew up in the South, and I was only really familiar with the SEC and a little bit of the Big 12, just kind of growing up where I grew up. I told you LSU was it for me. But being in these environments where they really care about basketball the way they do is second to none. We play in some incredible cities, in some incredible arenas, and some of these rivalries, even though the new Big East is how old is the new Big East?
Few years. I mean, the rivalries run deep, though.
Yeah, I mean, like you got us in UConn. Yeah. Providence. I feel like everybody's a rivalry for Providence. The way that place is always jam packed. Marquette, Creighton is always a fun time. And you're talking about places that really care about ball, and there's no football. There's no football in the Big East, so basketball is the mainstay. And that was new for me. That was new for me as a player and coach. You know it. I was in the South the whole time, and people like ball. People like their ball for sure, but they love their football. And I'm not mad at it. But being in the Big East, man, has been special.
I mean, MSG for the Big East tournament has to be something else.
It gets no better. It gets no better.
I believe it. I mean, we're having a little fun here, but I do want your honest opinion about something that is relatively serious, especially with coaches and looking out for the safety of their players. Court storming seems to always be a topic every single year, but this past week, it's become a very hot topic. Where do you land on court storms? Because you're coaching a team where have you gotten stormed on before? I'm assuming you have.
I have not gotten stormed on before.
Okay.
I have not gotten stormed on before. Listen, I will say this. It's a part of the tradition of the game. Obviously, you don't want to see anybody get hurt, and you want to protect both the fans and the players the best you can. But, I mean, what's a good game without a storm,
That's right. I like hearing that. Hey, Taylor, and confirm this for me, Jalen. You went to Provine High School, right?
Yes.
You're a graduate. You know who else is, Taylor?
Who else went to what's the high school? Provine High School?
Provine High School. The Provine High School.
Excuse me. I forgot the B. Who else went there? Do I get a hint to not drag this along for too long?
This will be fun.
He's a music guy. He's a rapper. You ever seen the Chevy with the
Wait. Wow. Rapper, producer.
Yep. I'm selling him short.
Not with the butterfly doors. Don't get like me,
Did you ever cross paths with David Banner?
David Banner.
Were you able to ever cross paths with him?
I think I saw him at like a YMCA one time playing ball when I was younger. But you don't go too many days in a row without hearing his name some kind of way or hearing his music. So shout out to David Banner. And, Provine's had a lot of guys. I think Fred Smoot played in the NFL, went to Provine. Justin Reed, God rest his soul, played at Ole Miss and played in the NBA for a little while. Provine's had some guys, and Jackson, Mississippi's had some guys as well. So, hey, how about that, man? David Banner.
I had to bring it up.
I almost think the Fred Smoot reference is it's almost crazier to me. We talked about underrated guys. Fred Smoot, underrated guy in the NFL.
Come on, man. That's what we produce. We produce dudes that just get it done, man.
Let me tell you something, man. When I reached out to you and I was doing the features, I was like, I can't wait to cut through all the college basketball and Creighton questions so I can get to David Banner and we can talk about him.
Have you ever seen a Chevy with yeah. There you go.
That's got to be your walkout, your team's walkout song, Creighton's walkout song. How do we get Coach McDermott to
I don't know if that's his style. Maybe I'll get him one day.
Jalen, this has been amazing and such a blast. The stories and the details you've shared have been awesome. Do me a favor, though. This is my last question and segment that I do with all of my guests. It's called Bring Them Up on Stage. Is there anyone that you can recommend in the college basketball space, player, coach, whatever it is, reporter, I don't know, who would be kind enough to jump on here like you were, share some stories, and deal with my nagging texts like you were?
Two people, and they both have a similar affiliation. One is Austin Clonch. He's an assistant coach at Alabama, former head coach of Nichols, who I had some battles with when I was at McNeese. But he's a great dude and a close friend of mine. Tavon Sadler, who's the current head coach of Nichols. He's the youngest head coach in the country at 28 years old. He played at Nichols 4 years ago. I think he was a player at Nichols 4 years ago, maybe 5 if I'm not mistaken, and now he's the current head coach and he's crushing it. 3 people actually. Corey McCray is associate head coach over at Florida, who I worked with at Mississippi State, who's also a great friend and mentor of mine. So yeah, those 3 guys would be great. They'll have a lot of fun.
I appreciate it, Jalen. I might tug on your shirt to get in contact with them. We were lucky to have. I appreciate it, man. This was a blast.
We'll say hello.
Hello.
Who we got in the back there?
Too bad you're not here enjoying the cigars.
we got to make a trip out there next time, all right?
There you go. My treat.
Jalen Courtney-Williams, this was a real blast. Thank you again. Best of luck this upcoming week. We will be in touch, and, of course, we'll be looking at you guys as we enter March. Thanks, man.
Awesome. This was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. You're listening to Theater and College Hoops. I am Subi. I got TD, my guy, Taylor Damel, back with me for this episode. We are brought to you by Belly Up Media. Go download, subscribe, rate, and review us on whichever device it is that you use. Your college hooper of the day, we're going to go with Ethan Raggy, former Creighton Blue Jay. Had to pull him out for this. That's right, Big East fans, Jay fans, Creighton fans. Get up. We got an awesome interview when we're talking everything Creighton later this episode with one of your own. So stay tuned for that. Check out the website at theaterandcollegehoops.com and make sure to follow me at CBB Theater to find out where the theat is. You should also follow Taylor at Taylor Damel. Let's open the curtains. Taylor, welcome back. Super Bowl is set. So this means this upcoming week is all college hoops, baby. This is really when folks are like, okay, there's, maybe I'm not ready for the NBA just yet. College hoops is heating up. There's a beautiful slate on Saturday, which we'll get to later this episode. But all eyes are on us. This is basically the dress rehearsal, right? This week. I think you've referenced it as the dress rehearsal in the past.
That sounds about right. Yeah. I mean, we got a 2-week span here where teams, this is about the time too, where teams really need to get their stuff together too. So that when they can fully debut to a national audience on February 12th, right, that they're ready. I saw a good point today and something that was a good reminder of how we feel about college basketball and teams. And if you remember that last year's national champion at this time last year was going through their worst stretch of basketball, essentially. And I believe they were even unranked at this point, right? Or had fallen to unranked around this time of year.
Really?
I think they were unranked for a week. So
wow.
I'll double check that here in a second. But point being, though, we do know that UConn had a very bad stretch in January last year. And it's a good reminder for teams that have national championship aspirations, like a Kansas or like an Arizona or any of those teams that have kind of lost a few more games than they would have anticipated to this point in the year, that, last year's national champion and this year's current number 1 team was playing their worst basketball at this time last year. So we're 48 days from Selection Sunday right now, I believe, or 47, I believe, when this podcast releases. It's a lot of time and not a lot of time all at the same time, right? 50 days is kind of
That's
like
a bar.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I like that.
Well, we'll talk about rappers later in this episode for sure, especially BET award-winning rappers as well from Mississippi. But it's just important to remember that there is enough time, right? There is enough time, especially if your team has shown signs and an ability to play that, a good brand of basketball. There is still time left. Now, if we're having this discussion in 3 weeks, it's a different discussion. Then let's just put it that way.
What's my cutoff date, man? What do I always say?
What, Valentine's Day?
It's Valentine's Day. So yeah,
cuffing season. The basketball season is just a cuffing season. It's all it is.
I mean, if you are stinky, there are some teams where I'll make a broad brush claim. I think it's pretty obvious. And gosh, if it wasn't for their history and their pedigree, I would say Michigan State is just a broad brush. They're not going to do anything. But again, there's always that small percentage. But there are teams out there where I'm like, it's over, it's done. UCLA, they've actually shown signs of life and competitive fire and good hoop. They're only a game or two out of the Pac-12 first place, but I think it's too little too late. Like that 3-week stretch where they just got absolutely bodied by the likes of Utah, who can't play on the road, by the way. But UCLA, like I'm not letting this fool me. You won't fool me, UCLA, over this past couple of weeks. Your season's cooked unless you go to Vegas and win the whole thing. But like February 14th, it's approaching, and I'm making some serious notes about how teams are playing.
So I'm going off script. Not that we have a real script here at Theater and College Hoops, but I'm going off script already and just talking about a team that I need to see more than anyone else in the country, and a team I am very specifically interested in because we have not seen them in this situation, and that's Gonzaga.
Yes.
They're still not projected to make the tournament as of right now.
St. Mary's game is going to be huge.
And that is this Saturday. It's this Saturday, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they play. Do they play Santa Clara as well again? I think.
I don't think they've.
Or does St. Mary's play Santa Clara this week? Whatever. The 3 best teams. One of them plays the other 2 best teams in the conference. Mm-hmm. And boy, I mean, Gonzaga pretty much can't afford to lose. If they lose 2 more games, they're not going to make the tournament. Like that's nuts to think. It's what we've always said about Gonzaga, that if they don't win those 3 or 4 non-conference games that they have per year, then their whole resume is pretty worthless. We're seeing that now come to fruition, more so than we've ever seen it before. I can't ever remember a team heading into February in Spokane there that was not projected to make the tournament.
Projected to make the tournament, dude. We're usually talking about them as a lock for the one seed because right. It is St. Mary's that has Santa Clara, and then
right. So huge week in the West Coast Conference this week. I mean, this is going to determine pretty much the entirety of the standings, and it could determine Gonzaga's season. And you hate to say that, especially talking about how I just said we have a lot of time left. Problem for Gonzaga compared to the other schools that we're concerned about. The other schools have a lot of opportunities in the Big East, or even in the Pac-12. There's opportunities in the Mountain West. There's opportunities. Gonzaga, they got like 2 opportunities left this year, and especially if they lose those 2 games, then they're completely screwed. They will have to win the conference tournament, which they will, because this is so dumb.
Right. Like that would not shock. But the thing is that I wouldn't take Gonzaga to go far, very, very far.
No, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like you'd make it, you keep it up for streak purposes, but they don't have dudes. They don't have Jalen Suggs, like the likes even of Kevin Pangos, Chet Holmgren, Drew Timme. Like those are dudes.
Nembhard just hasn't been the guy he was expected to be. We talk about him a little bit later in this episode as well. I mean, he's not bad, but he didn't take a step up by any means. Anton
Watson's good, but he can't. I don't know if he can. Like we're used to seeing NBA studs, like right. Pro players.
Yeah, or if not NBA guys, at least like all American borderline guys, all conference type of guys. We don't even really have that. We have nobody on this team that's like, oh yeah, they're an outside chance of being like a third team All-American or anything like that. Like that's not, this team doesn't possess that. Anyway, that's a team that I'm definitely looking for. That's got to be. Am I wrong in saying that to me is the number one team I'm focused on over this next couple of weeks here between now and Valentine's Day that will have to show me more or show everybody more to even be able to make the tournament. They got to be the biggest name. I mean, Michigan State, like you said, is kind of in the same boat. But they could win 6 in a row in the Big Ten and be like, oh, well, look at that. They're already a 7 seed. Like the opportunities just aren't going to be there for Gonzaga.
So you mentioned Nembhard, and you mentioned that we talk about him a little later in this episode. That is because we were so fortunate and lucky to have onto the program assistant coach at Creighton University, Jalen Courtney-Williams. This was a real blast. I had a lot of fun talking with Jalen. We sat down with him to talk about Creighton and their tremendous run here in January. Their only loss is to the defending national champs in UConn. We talk a little bit about their triple overtime thriller against Seton Hall and really dive into Jalen's background, a guy from Mississippi who went to LSU and then Morehead State and then returned to Starkville as part of Ben Howland's staff, and then went to McNeese State, right, in Lake Charles, and then now he's up at Omaha doing tremendous work for Doug McDermott and that staff. And Creighton's obviously experienced a ton of success over the last couple seasons. I gas him up. Jalen's he's a very modest individual, but his playing days were really good. His coaching is directly correlating with Creighton's success. So this was a lot of fun. And of course, you mentioned a rapper, TD. I don't want to give that away, actually. You got to listen to the end of the interview as to who we're bringing up. But this was a great interview, and Creighton fans, I know you're going to be excited for this one. We do talk a little bit about SDSU, so prep yourselves. But without any further delay, I want to get you to this interview with assistant coach for the Creighton Blue Jays, Jalen Courtney-Williams. Okay, I want to thank Jalen again for jumping on. Had a lot of fun sharing his insights, his stories. I think the talk about personnel for Creighton was very interesting. His work with Ryan Kalkbrenner, and then why that lineup that we mentioned. And again, that lineup is Trey Alexander, Stephen Ashworth, Ryan Kalkbrenner, Mason Miller, and Baylor Shireman. I loved getting his answer as to why it was such an effective and efficient lineup. Jalen Courtney-Williams is just a ton of fun, funny guy, and we're rooting for his success.
That was awesome. He was a great interview, and it is really funny. And I know we've had a number of these guys on lately, and it just kind of shows where we're at in our lives when we're interviewing coaches that are our age, right? And I know that I've missed several of the recent interviews, which you've been crushing it, by the way. Speaking of being humble and modest, you've been crushing it on the interview circuit here. But it's really interesting to go through the era of college basketball that we're familiar with, but then also discuss that with a guy who played in the era that we are familiar with, and then is now coaching in the current era of college basketball, and how we feel about basketball versus how someone feels who's actually involved in the game. And so that's what really gets me with a lot of these like 30 to 40-year-old guys, where it's like, we've watched the same things but have different perspectives on them, right? And when he was listing off all the players from Mississippi, which I guess I knew those guys were from Mississippi, but wouldn't have put that all together. Like that was like a great era of college basketball when those guys came. Like Renardo Sidney was supposed to be the guy in college basketball. Like I said, Jalen said, number one recruit in the country. One of the original bigs, not original, but I mean, he was expected to be able to step out and hit three, kind of before the 3-point era fully entered. It was a great interview.
But even some of the names like Monte Ellis, which is really deep. We talk a little Fred Smoot. And you're right, Taylor, just talking with these guys, and he's over here like, yeah, man, it's crazy. This one time I played Anthony Davis, like Anthony freaking Davis, a top 75 player ever to pick up a basketball. And yeah, he shared a stage with AD. It was a lot of fun chatting with Jalen, and very encouraging stuff for Creighton, right? I mentioned that January has been a very kind month to them. And Jalen talks a little bit about what he wants to see at this juncture of the season for the Jays. And let's see how February unfolds for them in the Big East. We're definitely going to be looking forward to that. Taylor, let's get out of here on some segments. How about some Damn Dimes? The big fella still hot. Let's recap last time you gave us some picks. St. Peter's -7 didn't hit for some reason. That was actually kind of shocking. Western Kentucky -6.5 does hit. And by the way, St. Peter's lost to Rider. Western Kentucky covered 6.5 against FIU, and Oregon covered -8.5 against ASU, bringing Taylor to 18, 15, and 3. We're just stacking winning weeks. You are, not me, you.
We're profitable for, like I said, I think 5 or 6 weeks in a row now. So we're still chasing. We still need another 3-0 week. I said last week, last episode, excuse me, I didn't feel great about my picks. I liked them. I didn't love them. I like my picks this week. I like them. And let's talk about a team that you just wrote off at the beginning of this episode in Michigan State.
Kind of
wrote off. Well, they're playing a team that written off would be a really nice way to put how their season has gone, and that's the Michigan Wolverines. Rivalry game at home. This is the time of year that this is a bet that's not based on anything that Michigan State has done positively this season. It's based off what we know about Michigan State as a program. This is about the time of year that that they get going. If they're going to get going, it's going to be right now. Michigan is just absolutely in shambles. And so I'm going to take Michigan State in a rivalry game, of course, by 11 at home against Michigan. I mean, I don't know. Michigan has nothing to play for at this point. They're about the most worthless. You talk about UCLA. They're about tied for the most worthless program in the country right now that had some decent expectations this year. So we're going to go.
That was an Elite Eight game, by the way, a couple seasons ago. UCLA.
Right, yeah, right. Not this year. Not even a CBI game this year. So we're going to go a little south of there for our next bet. And that's a team that kind of referenced at the beginning that maybe has had a few more struggles than they anticipated this year, and that's Kansas. Oklahoma State, a team that has had a lot more struggles than anticipated this year. Kansas, I think this is a get-right game for them. I don't love taking these big spreads, but Kansas is a 15-point favorite at home, and I can't imagine Kansas won't have a game at some point where they just put the hammer down after a couple losses this year. Not bad losses necessarily, but just losses. This is the worst start to the Big 12 regular season that Kansas has ever had under Bill Self. And they're still above 500.
Just absurd.
Yeah, right. But at some point, I feel like Kansas is going to have a game where they just mollywop someone just to get a lot of their frustration out. I think that's this game tonight. So that's Kansas by 15 over kind of a hapless Oklahoma State team at this point. And then I'm going to go take a road favorite, which is always a tough one, but a team that they struggle a little bit. Maybe a game they should have won by more. They've certainly had some personnel issues this year, but they might be rounding back into shape, and that's Illinois over Ohio State. Illinois is a 3-point favorite on the road at Ohio State. I think that given the fact that they have all their personnel back, for better or for worse, however we want to phrase that discussion, right? I'm not sure, but I do know that everyone is going to be on the court for this game, which gives them a significant talent advantage over Ohio State. And Ohio State certainly is not as bad as Michigan, but they did lose to Michigan like last week. So we're going to roll with Illinois -3 over Ohio State. We're going to go Kansas by 15 over Okie State, and we're going to go Michigan State by 11 over Michigan.
I love it. So we went the week prior, Rider, St. Peter's, FIU, Western Kentucky, ASU, Oregon. We're getting back to the big hitters this week, as we can tell. Illinois, Ohio State. It's getting a little the chatter is starting in Columbus regarding Chris Holtmann right now.
Yeah.
I think people are kind of saying like, all right, we're done with the Ryan Day slander after he's bringing in everyone, and this is the upcoming year. But they're like, okay, what's going on with basketball now? Because ever since they got upset by Oral Roberts, Ohio State has not looked good whatsoever, and that's now a couple seasons ago.
Ohio State is a weird, for lack of a better term, basketball program.
Yes.
It's kind of how I feel about Texas basketball in a way too, where it's like, why aren't you guys good every year? what do you need more than what you're given, and you're not good? I mean, in Texas, don't even get me started on Texas, because that was a lane violation last week, and they continue to violate that lane again. Oh my God. Just the biggest losers in this United States of America here.
It's like horns down. It's like horns down is some sort of slur, or like
it's absurd.
It is. It is so ridiculous. Just, I mean, what are we doing here? But
you could yell certain words at Texas players, and somehow they're more offended by horns down than actual legitimate negative comments from it's the dumbest thing of all time.
It is. Let's move on though, Taylor, to not so mid. Who are we highlighting from the mid-major ranks?
Yes, so let me get that pulled up right now. Well, I kind of messed up because we talked about it a little bit already, and that's the West Coast Conference and just what's happening there. So specifically St. Mary's having, being undefeated in the conference and having an opportunity to cement themselves this week as the team in that conference. For me, that's what I'm highlighting in that, because if St. Mary's wins these games against Santa Clara and Gonzaga, they'll essentially have, I don't want to say put away the conference, but it'll be about right there. And they just have a real opportunity to finally unseat Gonzaga as the team in that conference. So my not so mid is St. Mary's just kind of continuing down the path. They beat LMU, they beat Pacific, which they held Pacific to 28 points the other day, by the way.
Oh yeah, and Gonzaga didn't play all that well against that Pacific team.
I know, right? So my not so mid is not necessarily about in any specific performance. It's just the body of work that St. Mary's has put together thus far, giving them an opportunity in the next 5 days to have essentially the biggest 5 days that they could potentially have and have had in a basketball program since like Del Vadova was there. And friend of the program, Omar Samhan.
Omar Samhan. That's right. Yes, of course.
Right. Yeah. Friend of the program. So
that was last year.
Yep. So my not submit is St. Mary's and West Coast Conference. I mean, it's coming to a head this week.
We're gonna take a trip, Taylor, to Connecticut. All right. Hamden, to be more specific, where the Quinnipiac Bobcats are rolling right now. All right. They are 8-1 in conference, 16-4 overall. We mentioned St. Peter's. Yeah. Well, they're a game clear of them for first place. Tom Pecora, first season in Hamden at Quinnipiac doing this. First of all, I cannot lie. The only reason I know about Quinnipiac, or I've heard about it prior to this podcast, is because I grew up in the area and a lot of high school friends, family go there. But if you don't know about Quinnipiac, the only thing you may know about them is their hockey team. Nobody knows anything about their basketball team, kind of including myself, if I'm being brutally honest. But they are atop the MAAC. Okay. I mentioned what a great job Tom Pecora is doing in his first year there. And then we also need to talk a little bit about their balanced efforts from their players. Matt Belong, not to be confused with Matt LeBlanc. He is leading the team in points at 18.4. Amari Tice is leading the team with 7 rebounds per game. And Savion Lewis, he's the facilitator. He's averaging nearly 8 assists per game. Those are the 3 key studs for Quinnipiac. Now, of course, as with other schools that are in similar conferences or play similar schedules, this is all going to come down to the conference tournament. But for right now, as we sit here in late January, we had to give some love to the Quinnipiac Bobcats, who again sit at 16-4, first in conference. And I hope they put together some sort of like Kennesaw State run, which is to say, I hope they win their conference tournament and get to the NCAA tournament. Shout out to the boys in Hamden.
So I think we can both agree that Quinnipiac's the best basketball team in Connecticut.
Right now,
right?
Yeah.
Right.
It's either them or UConn. I think that's fair.
Toss.
Lane violation, Taylor. What's grinding your gears?
So I don't want to start rumors on this podcast, But if I was going to start a rumor, I'm not starting a rumor, but if I was going to start a rumor, I'd talk about Musselman potentially angling his way out of Arkansas. Did you see this today?
I did not see that.
Little rumor flying around. This is my lane violation. Is that coaches looking for other jobs before Valentine's Day, right? Looking for a partner before Valentine's Day. Apparently, and again, this is all just unsubstantiated. I can't back any of this up, but apparently, Muss is potentially angling his way out of Arkansas, and maybe has sent some inquiries to two maroon and gold teams in this country, one in the north in Minnesota and one in the south here near me at ASU. So really interesting to see how what's at play already for a guy like Musselman, who's probably, where do we rank him as a coach currently?
He's a top 10, top 15 coach. I remember
top 10? Top 10?
15? Like, he's been to 2 straight Elite Eights.
I'm saying 10 seems like a lot. Okay, sure. Yeah. All right.
I don't know many other folks that have that kind of resume recently.
Okay, true. I'll give you that. I'm not going to put him top 10, but he's a better coach than maybe what the Arkansas program is I guess where I'm going with this. But the two schools that he's looking at aren't necessarily better than Arkansas. So
no, they're
just
not.
think it's interesting when you have rumors like this come out during a season. I know they're having a struggle of a season, but if you're a coach, you can't let this stuff come out during a year. So that's what my lane violation is. Come on, man. We got to keep things wrapped up a little more, because we still got, as I said, 47 days at least in left in this college basketball regular season. Keep it together a little bit.
My lane violation is for Keyshawn Johnson's technical foul in the Arizona-Oregon game. I was watching at a bar, Taylor.
Absurd. So dumb.
I mean, just so annoying. Like, I'm watching at a bar, so I don't have much audio. I see Caleb Love throw down a vicious dunk, momentum shifting dunk, a dunk that, if you're not a robot, moved you in some way as a fan, but certainly as a player. So what does Keyshawn Johnson do? He does a little head tap, because it was on your freaking head, whoever that Oregon defender was. And that warranted a technical foul. And so Oregon shoots 2 free throws, which they hit. And then Jermaine Couisnard hits some ridiculous 3-quarter shot that it can only happen to Arizona. And the halftime lead would have been 14 or so, and it got trimmed to 7 as a result of that technical foul. It's just so bad. And I'm so tired of having to come up here and blame refs for not letting kids have fun. It's not even letting them have fun, like showing emotion, right? How can you play this game if you're like the Kawhi Leonard shot when he's going up for a layup and his face is just completely stone-faced? Kawhi Leonard's the only person on earth who can do that, all right? For the rest of them, when a huge dunk happens on the road, you let the guy celebrate a little bit, even if it's not harming him. Like, Keyshawn Johnson's not shoving anyone. He's not taunting anyone that bad. He's not saying anything. So that's my lane violation. And for having to be at the bar with having no audio, I'm literally over here being like, did Caleb Love get a tech because he was chirping at the fans? And both are absurd. The fact that this resulted in a technical foul is nothing short of garbage. So I want to make sure that ref hears how bad I think he is. And this is just an epidemic all across college basketball. You do something that moves the needle for you emotionally, and you can't celebrate accordingly. Otherwise, it's a technical foul. So annoying.
So I don't want to steal your lane violation, but since we're on Oregon and their missteps, so that was the first sellout at Oregon in 6 years, by the way. A team that went to the Final Four like 6 years ago, right? Like, so
that's weird.
7 years ago. And then they honored the Fiesta Bowl football winning team in Oregon there, and so they made an entire section in the student section for the football team. Well, they all left after they got honored, which is hilarious. And then when they honored the team, it was when they had them all come onto the court when Oregon center got hurt and was on the ground. Whatever his name is, I can't remember his name. Yeah,
Biddle.
Yeah, so he gets hurt. Altman's on the court hugging his player as he just suffered like a season-ending injury. And then they try and bring Oregon's football team onto the court. This isn't funny. Sorry. They try and bring Oregon's football team onto the court to razz everybody up, right? Well, a guy just like tore his ACL laying on the court crying. It was like just a comedy of errors as it related to how Oregon students, the players, and the fans all interacted with each other during that game. So that would be its own lane violation right there. Hilarious that like all 100 members of the football team just bailed after they got leaving a massive section of the student section just empty. Kind of hilarious.
Yeah, very, very much planned on purpose to do it when Arizona came and, rally the team. And it probably was loud in there, but yeah, Oregon football, Dan Lanning, I can't imagine cares too much. Bo Nix, I don't think they care. But getting back to that technical, disgusting. I hated it so much, but I got that out of my system. Taylor, finish us up on some positivity, your easy layup for this week.
Well, something that's near and dear to my heart, Sub, and that's Fordham and Duquesne basketball. And really more so it's about that they had dollar beer night at Fordham versus Duquesne. And we're talking about full legitimate cans of beer, not just like like an 8-ounce pour or something like that. So shout out to Duquesne specifically for dollar beer night against a powerhouse in Fordham, of course. So I don't think there's anyone in the country who can't get behind supporting a dollar beer night at a college basketball game.
I love that. I hope those kids have a blast. My easy layup, Taylor, is the Saturday slate. I referenced it earlier this episode, but my goodness, the games that are scheduled, it's a perfect storm for getting eyes on college basketball because there's no football this weekend. You got Duke, North Carolina, the greatest rivalry in all of sports. I'm going to save my sermon for Thursday's episode. It's a yearly sermon that I have to deliver about why and how Duke Carolina is the greatest rivalry in all of sports. So I'm going to save that. But we got that. A top 7 Duke Carolina Saturday. Tennessee, Kentucky, two of the best teams in the SEC. Tennessee still not getting any hype. Maybe it's my timeline. Maybe I'm not following the right people, but all I see is the rhetoric around Kentucky's amazing offense and their defense is kind of lacking. Keep hearing about Reed Shepherd, and the only person we hear about for Tennessee is Dalton Connect. And it's because he's averaging like 30 plus points. Sure. And in my eyes, should be National Player of the Year. Debate your mom, Purdue fans. I'm sure you'll get Zach Edey again. But Tennessee, Kentucky, man, that is going to be a special matchup. And then we got Houston and Kansas.
That's the one I'm looking forward to because, Houston wins that game, and they got, despite a couple losses last week, they have a stranglehold on Kansas specifically. They'll be 2.5 games essentially up on Kansas with, just 43 days to play at that point, So,
yeah.
No, that's the one that specifically I'm looking for because if Houston can go on the road, beat Kansas in Allen Fieldhouse, then they will have supplanted Kansas this year, not in general. Well, I don't know.
No, maybe not in general.
Maybe the last 3 years, No.
Well, these are two teams that have both been to Final Fours very recently, and this is one of those deals, Taylor, that when you look at the schedule and when you see Houston go into the Big 12, you're like, hell yeah, this game.
No, this is the one, and it's both teams have maybe lost a game or two more than they would have liked to this year, but it still doesn't make this game any less big because it still will probably be the deciding game. Or one of the two deciding games that decides the Big 12 this year. So that's the one I'm specifically looking forward to. Duke, North Carolina, great. That's a one-off type of game for me. Houston, Kansas is the one that I'm legitimately looking forward to most.
I think the one I'm looking to most is Vols Cats, Tennessee, Kentucky, but this is actually a close second. Purdue, Wisconsin. That's a top 6 matchup. I could absolutely see Purdue.
Wisconsin's not that good. Wisconsin's not the 6th best team in the country.
Look, man, let's see.
They lost by 185 points in Tucson like a month ago. Like they're not the 6th best team in the country.
So fine, but I don't want to see them in March. Actually, did you see Big Cat tweeting about that? He was like, "Do Arizona fans want to see us in March?" Absolutely not. No, I do not. I despite what happened in December. But Purdue, Wisconsin is going to be a really good game. I think it's going to be competitive. It's going to be a Big Ten brawl. You mentioned St. Mary's, Gonzaga, and then let's not forget about TCU and Texas Tech. big tournament implications here for TCU, I think specifically. Texas Tech, baby. What I tell you about Grant McCasland, they're really hot right now. Now, are they the best team in the Big 12? I don't think so. But right now, for what it's worth, as we sit here in late January, let's give them their flowers. But TCU Texas Tech is going to be a critical game. And I could see that being one of those crazy shootout Big 12 games that goes to like one overtime or double overtime. But easy things, easy layups for this weekend. It's the Saturday slate. Buckle up and settle in. All right, folks, want to thank Jalen Courtney-Williams one more time for jumping onto the program. Had a lot of fun. And thank you, as always, for listening. We'll catch you next time here on Theater and College Hoops.